we get set up, you'll see spaces for you all. Looking at these clips, this is a testament to the incredible variety of forms and genres that our art form has. They're such different films. You are all such major masters of the form. And these are strange times. And as I was looking at the 5 films, I said, there is something similar in every one of these films, because each one of your films is a creation of another time. We start, Paul, you're talking about 1973. We're talking about 101 or 191 AG. We're talking 1925, Jane. Stephen, we're talking 1973. No, the 50s, I'm sorry. And Kenneth, it's 1970. It's 1969. So we got 69, we've got the 58, we've got 1925, we've got 10,101, and we got 1973. So all of you had to create a new world. I want to talk about that. Yeah. I want to talk about the process of creating new worlds. But my first question for all of you, because this is an audience of directors and directorial team, and I'm going to start with you, Paul, all the way over there. How do you know when you've got it? What I mean by that is you've staged a scene, you've watched it, you've done a number of takes. What is it that gets you to say, we've got it, let's move on? Paul?
Well, it's usually when Adam Sumner, my first assistant director, says, I think that's enough now.
By the way, this has been unfair. This is Paul Thomas Anderson for his movie Licorice Pizza. Let's do that. And Denis Villeneuve for Dune. And Jane Campion for Power of the Dog. And Steven Spielberg for West Side Story. And Kenneth Branagh for Belfast. I mean, your films are so wonderful, they speak for themselves. And I know sometimes as we talk as directors and you get asked the questions a similar time, it's not really what you do. What you do is actually make these movies. But it's a valid question. Your AD tells you it's enough. Are there sometimes when you turn to your assistant director and say, yeah, but I need one more?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's, it's like the UN, but, I'm America, really. But I mean, sometimes you unfortunately kind of whimper away feeling as if something is not right. But at its best, you feel great confidence in the moment. Something has happened and it feels good, and then when you're driving home, you're hit with that wave of, hang on a second, where that confidence and that excitement. Now I've got to try and go to sleep tonight and think about it all, and then you just get up the next day and do it again.
And where do you position yourself when you're on a take? Where are you usually?
You mean physically on the set?
Physically, yeah.
Well, ringside, right? I mean, whatever is closest to the action. I like to be as close as I can to the action, and that the action meaning wherever the actors are. I guess I suppose I'd like, or whatever the need is for the scene. The most important thing to me is to be able to be the first thing that they look at when they're done, so that they can see me as soon as they've finished. I just want to make sure that I think I remember early on knowing enough actors who were always disappointed that they had more of a relationship with their camera operator than their director, and they found that very frustrating. And I kind of got in my mind at a young age that you should be the first thing that they're able to see, so that they can feel either support or or a red flag, even if it's not right, but just to be there for them.
Thank you. Denis, when do you know you've got it? What makes you say we can move on?
I have no. First of all, it's tough to come back to come after Paul's was very funny. My answer is not funny. It's like
doesn't have to be.
there's no rules for me. Sometimes, when as we know, when we do the casting, right, and sometimes it can be after one take. You know, if I feel it, it's like a matter of feeling that it's like if the instrument is tuned, if there's truth in what I received, and so it's like it's a visceral feeling. It's a very deep intuition, and sometimes it can happen after one take. Now, sometimes I cheat. As on a project, I realize sometimes that some actors work better under tremendous pressure. And on Dune, I will not mention the name, but there was one specific actor that I knew that when I wanted to get what I wanted, I needed just to say, okay, that's enough, we move. And then he said, hey, one more. And I said, all right, I will give it to you. And I knew that will be the take. So, yeah.
And where do you position yourself?
I like to be just under the camera, as close as possible to what the lens sees, and to be, as Paul says, close to the actors as much as possible when it's possible. Yeah.
And when you have a complex shot, that I'm sure many of these were, particularly because of CGI responsibilities, how are you checking that besides being next to your actors at that moment?
But the thing is that there's always we have monitors, so I can as I'm watching with the actor, I have always a monitor with me. Of course, there are some moments where it's not possible and I'm behind the monitor, but it's always to keep. I'm trying to keep the sets as intimate as possible and to be with my monitor. If I cannot be beside the camera because it's on a crane, whatever, to be as close as possible to the actors, never be far away. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you, Denis. Jane, what about you? When do you know you've got it? When do you know you can say, let's move on?
Well, what I do is really simple. I just watch. And if I start thinking, I know it didn't work. I'm thinking about things to correct or, stuff like that. And I go, okay. So it's like when I'm watching and I'm completely engaged, then I figure, oh, that worked, and it's sometimes surprising because you have ideas about what you think what should happen in the scene or in the take. And something else quite different happens because the actors are going to surprise you with ways that they interpret it. And yet this very simple sort of just body checking, like, oh yeah, I'm paying attention. I'm still paying attention. I'm engaged, I'm connected to it. I'm not trying to be connected. I just am connected. And so once that starts to happen, I know it's good. I know it's working. And then it's just like, oh, do you want to, should we see if we can turn the heat up or change it, or maybe another interpretation of the same thing. And it's like a little consultation with the actors and me. Like quite often they'll say, yeah, I would love some more takes, and I'll say, yeah, let's see what else can happen, because they're all amazing. And it's really nice to let them have that sense of being empowered to run themselves dry, really.
And where do you position yourself mostly?
I'd like to sit somewhere comfortable. Like an audience would. Like I try to be the audience in a way, so that I'm not like super with them, or just try to, in my body, tell the truth. Let my body tell the truth about what's happening, because I certainly know that feeling of like, oh, that's amazing. You're so jazzed up that you can't even pay attention, except in a really super weird way. And then you think everything's incredible, and then you later on see it and you go like, oh my God.
Yes,
so bad. Oh no. I always remember that thing that Kurosawa said, that you really don't or can't tell more than about 65% of what's happening on set. And it's like when you're making clay pots or stuff like that, and you put different colors on them and then bake them, and then that's the kind of thing you can't predict. And when they come out, how they come out, is different than what you imagined, and you don't know how that happened.
Yep. Well spoken, Jane.
So I really don't think I know, you know.
Stephen, what about you? When do you know you've got it? And particularly, this is different, I think, because of the form, which is a newer form for you. So there may have been different things where scenes are with performers and scenes are with an entire group of singers and dancers. When do you know you've got it?
Well, when there's music involved, the music tells you when you've got it, because the music essentially, it's either a live performance on set or it's to playback, and the music is mathematically only so long, and when it's over, it's over. So that's it, and you just make sure that if it was playback, we have experts that watch the lips, was it in sync, and then we play back the take to make sure that everybody is in sync. But also the most important thing is, are they acting the music, not just parroting the lip sync, but are they actually performing and soulfully? Because all the singers in our movie, everybody sang. We didn't have any ringers that came in. And because they all sang, they are passionately singing to the playback. So it's not just they're making their mouths move; they're singing as vocally and as passionately as they did when 4 of the numbers are done live in West Side Story. There's 4 numbers that are 100% live to no playback at all, and that's when you kind of know you have it. But with acting, when it's a performance scene, I've discovered, since I've been doing this for a long time, that it's just never fast enough. And it's just never fast enough, because when I was making movies earlier, I get to the cutting room and it was too late to fix anything. And where I'm in the cutting room and I'm saying, oh my God, these master shots are lethargic. There's too many pauses. There's too many beats. There's too many commas in the tempi of just the dialogue. And so I tend to make the actors go faster than they're comfortable acting. And when they're really going up on their lines because they're tripping over their words, that's when I know I've got it. That's really good. Then when I get to the cutting room, it all sort of syncs up and makes sense to me.
Do you actually use that word faster, or will you push them? I mean, how will you get
I usually say faster and funnier.
You mean the famous F&F?
Absolutely. You have to say that.
Did you find it works? Always?
Yeah, it always works. As long as they're not improvising what's not been written. But yeah.
Cool, thanks, David. And where do you position yourself, particularly on this film, which may have been different?
Well, early on, I used to operate the camera. So early on, in a lot of my earlier films, I was behind the lens. And then the actors were right next to me. And as I got older and my back got worse and I couldn't do the calisthenics you need to be on a Fisher dolly or a moviola dolly and have the head of the camera going up and down, and you can feel the L5, L4 twisting and going out of shape. Now, I'm just like Jane. I like to be the most comfortable with something over my head with shadow, with a shade, watching a monitor, because I don't need to be near the actors when they're acting, because in seconds I'll walk to them at the end of a take. I don't have to be intimate with them that way. And I'm also getting a chance to see what the scenes feel like as a movie. So I'm actually watching a film in a tent.
Got it.
I don't mind that.
No, thank you. Oh, cool. Kenneth, when do you know you've got it?
Well, there are lots of different variations on it. I mean, I like what you were saying, Jane, about what Kurosawa said, because there are many times, I don't know if you found it, when people, maybe you or actors, have said, that's it, that's the one. And, a week later or a month later, you realize that is not remotely the one. So, you thought it was take one because we were all so excited that morning. Oh, and you could see, and the tears rolled down, and it was so, and everybody felt it. And we all walked away, but somehow something wasn't right about it. So I've learned to be kind of flexible. But I had one experience on Belfast where at the end of the movie, there's a big close-up of Judi Dench, and she is a remarkable person for, she's often downplays her skill as a film actor because she comes from the theatre. I think she's been nominated for an Oscar eight times since she was 60. She didn't get to. She was told early on, your face will never work for movies. So we know different. Her face is the end of our movie. I said to her, look, we've got these lines that are scripted. I think they're okay. I think that they'll work. But would you mind? I know the sun is shining and it's a big close up. So it seems to me that it would be good if you didn't move much. And she, with this skill acquired through a ton of theatre and all of this film work has allowed her to be very, very free moment to moment, actually, as if every single take was a rehearsal in the theatre. So it can always be different. She throws it away and she'll listen. So I said to her, look, so here's some variations I'll throw in on what you could say. If you don't mind, we'll just keep the camera running. If you have an instinct yourself, I'll just shut up and you could say some variation on these lines. It doesn't really matter whether we say all 4 of these short lines or whether you might say 1 or 2. We'd been going for 3 or 4 minutes. She was still very patient. And what I admired enormously was that she was still sort of Mount Rushmore still. So, because she knew she was in, it was so big, the close-up. And it seemed as though every time she did it, it felt, if you were watching that glass vessel there, that it felt like with every take you saw the liquid in the vessel sort of rising. So it just felt as though I was seeing somebody behind the eyes. It was getting richer and thicker and thicker. Anyway, in the end, after a pause, I said, I think we have it, Jude, but if you just want to, in your own time, say it again. So she took a while, didn't move, said it, and then I went, okay, cut. Okay, just let me see that one. Let me see that one. Let me hear that one. Okay. Oh, fuck, no! What is that noise? What is that noise on the soundtrack? And the sound recordist, Denis Villeneuve, said, that is your intake of breath, sir. She did the last one. And that was me. And when I listened to it again, it was me going, and it was just, that was the hairs on the back of my neck because she like, boom, bullseye. She just.
So then now you know when you got it. When
well,
you breathe in.
60 years in, I think it's the first time I knew.
And where do you position yourself?
Well, as the film reveals, you know, a love of movies from this country, and many of the movies about movies had people sitting under the camera. So I like to do that. But as you were saying, you know, I like to be flexible. Sometimes the last thing an actor wants is looking at me under the camera. So sometimes I'll just double check. Would you like me to be in another room? Would you like me to be physically behind the piece of metal? But so I try, and I like to be close because that's how I grew up watching people being close, you know, in movies. I thought that's how they did it in movies. So that's how I started. But now I'll just do what it seems would get the best result for everybody.
Got it. As I was saying, you've all created worlds. Louis Pasteur, some 200 years ago, the inventor of vaccinations, said that chance favors the prepared mind. I'd like to hear about the pre-production preparations of all of you in terms of creating worlds that don't exist right now. Let's start with you, Kenneth. How were you creating Belfast, and particularly how you created that block? And I ask it in reference to the clarity of where things are happening on that block, whether the attack is from this side, where the house of value is, or it's from another side. And I don't think our audience, your audience, necessarily gets it, but they do get that it's happening. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious how you devised and prepared, let's say, in this case, the locations for Belfast at this time.
Well, we started with the instinctive idea that, given the title and the nature of the story, that we would go to real Belfast. Then COVID occurred. We went to real Belfast. We needed to change a street, a chosen street, which we started off with the street that I lived in. Half of it is knocked down, including where my house was. But we went around on city bikes with our location production designer, cinematographer, and everything, and because it's a village city, you can get around everything. So I went to all the places that were real, but we understood that by the time you tried to take satellite dishes and everything else that was in 2021 away, and possibly move some families out in order to have the street for a while, that actually ultimately that became legally impossible because of COVID. So we couldn't do that. So we had 10-year-old Jude Hill, 87-year-old Judi Dench, and the COVID issue. So we decided that we would build in order to fully get behind the idea of shooting from the 9-year-old's point of view, which would physically sometimes involve putting the camera at the same height as the kid himself. So that began to make us aware of the heights of various buildings. And in the end, we decided that we would build the street and allow ourselves the flexibility to have all the imagery, whether it was barbed wire or street lamps that we could have kids dance around, and that we could physically move if we needed to do it without the audience being aware of it. To have that kind of flexibility became very, very important. And in COVID times, it seemed that the preparation seemed, at least from my point of view, to be necessitating more specificity than ever. I worked recently with Annette Bening, and I asked her. I said, what's the common characteristic of the great directors you've worked with? She said, well, I tell you something. She said, it's not a very sexy word, but organized. They're really organized. I said, so, and what does that lead to? She says, well, that gets you quicker to the fun bit, when, excitement and, experimentation is possible. And in the, filming in the time of COVID, I had those words in my ears, was just, let's try and organize everything we can, because we've got kids' hours, so we couldn't work with the young people for so long. We had zonal systems for filming. We had one-way systems. We had limited shooting hours. So being organized in order to get to the point of departure for what you hoped ultimately was going to feel like a happening was more important than ever. So building and controlling actually something that ultimately we wanted to feel very authentic became the curious paradox of how we approached this film.
The nature of the interiors there's always sort of a three-dimensionality between where there may be a window back here and here you're in the foreground, or characters, or the alley that leads in. How was that all designed? Because a lot of your movie takes place in their house and Pa's house. And they really do have a design to them. They don't feel like square spaces. What was this about?
Well, I appreciate that. It was going back to the 9-year-old's point of view, and these tiny houses. Because the first time I went back, and when my house was still up there, I was amazed. It seemed so small. And I remember, well, I was very small then, and being small, those tiny houses seem to have their own massive sort of characteristics. In the back, with an outside loo, and my grandfather's got a weird Willy Wonka kind of tinker's workshop full of stuff. I mean, there's nothing he didn't pick up. Ropes, bits of metal. They always try and make money out of something. Somebody had come to the back door, something be passed across in a brown envelope. I don't know what was going on. And it became the unofficial men's room as well. That's where, in these tiny houses, the men sat out there as if they were allegedly having their private, important male conversation. But the window was open, and all the women who were just as far away as this table were there, making sure they didn't do all the usual stupid things they tended to do. And in that, with the boy, again, this idea of the 9-year-old being central to the way to tell the story was letting the actors know that, and the production designer know, that I wanted to try and create a frame in which we saw what depth there was, and the way in which small groups of people related to each other in small places. But from an acting and performance point of view, we often did long, uninterrupted takes where I felt I might get the best out of the boy reacting to people, and indeed might get the best out of the adults, who would be fascinated, as they often were, by the utter reality of the boy in unrehearsed moments. So much of it was to plan to try and have a visual that could allow a long, uninterrupted take in a small space with a large number of people, where the desire was not to rehearse, but to be a voyeur or an overlooker or an overhearer inside a world that could feel very real. Often we put the camera right outside the back door, so very quickly they were unaware of us. And for the purposes of this, it felt like that was a useful influence in the atmosphere of the scene.
In the actual spaces that you lived in, were this labyrinth nature of the interiors, or was that the design so you could accomplish this?
Well, it was a sort of combination of both. They were both tiny, but your imagination expanded to fill the vacuum. And in a way, that was also a key to the style of the movie, which at times would be entirely accurate to the small spaces and the tiny world of another beautiful day in the neighborhood that becomes a playground changed into a fortress, becomes something influenced by the boy's attempt to process the revolution that is the arrival of violence that changes everything in the course of a few minutes, from something peaceful to something that is now utterly unsettled, and a way of navigating that really only available to the 9-year-old through the medium of movies. That's where he gets his stories from. Westerns, good guys, bad guys, and often women protecting and being the warrior queens inside all this, unacknowledged but all powerful. And so that also allowed for a visual style that could expand where the boy's imagination expands it in order just to cope. So instead of seeing horrible, vicious intimidation on a Belfast street, to potentially see it as James Stewart and John Wayne in some kind of confrontation is a way of making sense of it. Because if that happens, someone will come in and a good guy will win, and and maybe somebody will ride off to the sunset, and I'll be at the end of the street going, "Come back, Shane, come back." So that all of that sort of, all spun out of deciding to try as much as possible seeing it from his point of view.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. Stephen, you're creating another time and not relying, I think, on just CGI for your world, but actually making it real. And you've got major streets that I guess some of them real and some of them that you created. You have a major locations in terms of where Maria lives. You have a major location in terms of docks. Talk about creating the time in these spaces.
Well, New York is certainly a principal character in the story. And New York in 1957, during the Robert Moses slum relocation project, where they tore basically the West Side down, from the West Side Highway to Columbus, from basically 58th Street over to 72nd Street and San Juan Hill, and all the residents were kicked out. And that's where they built the Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts. So we were telling a story where the Sharks and the Jets were actually fighting over a pile of rubble. At the end of the Jets song, the very first really song in the picture, they actually run up and victorious that the Jets have, together as a gang, run to the top of a rubble pile to claim victory, empty, hollow victory, certainly. And all that was created in Paterson, New Jersey, in a large parking lot where Adam Stockhausen, the production designer, and his art directors recreated New York in 1957. In other words, the buildings that were toppled, half of them were up and half of them were down. You could see where people took their paintings off the walls, and there's a little shadow where the painting hung for decades on the wall, and that was all the details were so amazing that Rena and Adam had done. And a lot of the film was shot on the streets of Harlem. We shot in the actual air shafts in Harlem. That's not a set. Tonight, the song Tonight is shot on a set at Steiner Studios. Adam Stockhausen recreated a portion, a 5-story, entire portion, 4 sides of that air shaft. But the wider shots were done night for night in the actual air shaft. In Harlem. We shot in the Bronx. We shot in Queens. We shot all over the place because we were trying to recreate the way it looked in the pictures we were researching before we ever started the story, the production. And New York obviously has changed. It's certainly changed. The street lights are painted differently. There's crosswalks where there were no crosswalks before. The only real digital work in the entire movie is taking out the crosswalks, is coloring the traffic lights, restoring them to the way they were in 57, and also taking out the tens of thousands of air conditioners that are sticking out of windows, and satellite dishes on rooftops. And so most of the VFX budget was spent getting rid of the things we couldn't physically. When I made Raiders of the Lost Ark before the digital era, we were shooting in Tunisia. We were shooting actually in Kairouan in Tunisia. And the art department had to go to 6,000 dwellings and pay everybody to take their television aerials off their rooftops because there was no way to get rid of it otherwise. Thank ILM and all of their breakthroughs in the digital arts in order to give all of us a chance to make period pictures again.
Which of the locations it was the most challenging for you in terms of what you were shooting? Things you were creating or the reality of the streets?
No, the reality of the streets was most challenging because America was shot in the middle of summer when it was 95, 97 degrees, a heat index to 108. And Paul Tazwell had done fantastic costumes, but they didn't have air conditioners built into them. And so the dancers were absolutely dying, and yet they'd come back for take 8 and take 9 and take 10 with smiles on their faces. And then we would mop them down, and they'd go back for take 11. It was incredible, their tenacity and their love for dancing and singing and performing. But that was the toughest thing, was shooting in New York in the summer, outside and with all the layers of costumes.
In the Maria's apartment in the firescape in that particular song when they first meet,
yes,
that's a very complex firescape in terms of gratings, and I'm interested in how you decided to whether you walked on and said, oh, now this is how I'm going to shoot it because you've given me this, or whether you had a discussion about, yes, I want to make it difficult so that he's going to have to climb over here and go over here. That whole...
I found that in storyboarding. When I was storyboarding it, I found that I wanted to keep Tony and Maria away from each other as much as possible. I wanted to echo the fact that Tony had spent a year in prison and was out now on parole. I wanted to show that there were obstacles between that love story. And so, I kind of designed it when I did all the drawings, that once he gets up to Maria, the grating is locked and he can't get onto the actual fire escape. And then he's got to kind of, trapeze walk his way. He had a big safety wire on him, don't worry. He was fine, but he had to trapeze walk all the way to another balcony when they start the song. And then as the song progresses, he sings to her through the heavy grating, then he sings to her through the bars of the side of the fire escape. And eventually, when Stephen Sondheim's words gave me reason to let him vault the side of the fire escape, and then I put the actual ladder between them. So now they're singing between a ladder. So nothing is letting them come together until the Sondheim lyrics invite the final moment where they're actually able to come together and sing as a duet. And so that was all done in storyboarding.
Very impressive because it's very effective. Now I see how it got designed. That's what I was sort of asking you. In terms of docs, since there's so much in docs, talk about the design of docs and how you decided to do what you did with it.
Adam Stockhausen, just decided it should be very colorful. He decided that, that the linoleum tiles or the tiles on the floor should look like a checkerboard, and there should be colors with all the products and the candy and the candy jars. And he wanted to really create an upbeat place to both play against the kind of ennui of a place like that looks happy, but in fact is going to lead to the most tragic moment in the story, which is essentially Anita's lie to Valentina about Tony being dead, about Maria being dead. And so Adam made a tremendous contribution to this film. I mean, Christy Acosta, who is just an extraordinary, exceptional producer, was able to bring some of the best opportunities to me to find people that really loved the story and really wanted to make a cut. So I let all the divisions really kind of present to me their vision. I'm not so dictatorial about that. I hire somebody for what they can give me, not for what I can give them to give me. That doesn't make any sense.
Yes.
And he just made a tremendous contribution to that candy story.
Just one more question about docs. There's the pinball machine, there's the sliding ladder, both of which you use in terms of when he's seeing something's coming. And I'm interested, did you add these elements? Is this also something preconceived, or were you walking and seeing, wow, I can now use this?
I don't want to take too much time up here because it's very complicated, but I've never done a musical before. So to fold in song and dance choreography, which I've done just little tastes of in 1941, I had a dance. In Ready Player One, there was a zero gravity dance, and certainly at the beginning of Temple of Doom, there was a dance which was George Lucas's ideas, because he said, "You've always wanted to make a musical. Let's start Temple of Doom with a dance." That was his idea, because he knew I wanted to make a musical someday, and he gifted that idea to me. But the rehearsal process was essential, and my iPhone was my companion. Because I basically, as Justin Peck was putting all these dancers on their feet, I was running around finding my shots with an iPhone. I would sit on one of those little scooter chairs with the casters, and they'd be moving me all through the dancers, and I'd be looking at my shots, and I'd be cutting them together to the music. And so my trial and error period, it was really, I learned how to shoot this big sort of production based on 3.5 months of rehearsal, which I couldn't have done I couldn't have made the movie without the rehearsal. And moments like that where Justin was having Tony singing Something's Coming to Valentina, there were just moments where the music felt propulsive. And so I said to Adam Stockhausen, there's one moment here, it'd be so great in just this measure of music that Tony, if he jumps on one of those ladders that moves on casters, and he could take a ride to the end of the shelf, and then when the music accelerates the other way, he takes a ride back in the other direction. And the pinball machine I put in because I wanted him to, at a certain point in the music, leap on the pinball machine and pull the thing and get the pinball numbers to light up behind him. So those were all ideas I had based on watching these dances, being originated by Justin Peck, the choreographer.
Oh, no. Wow, thank you. Jane, you create an entire other world in 1925. The house itself is an amazing structure, in both interior and exterior, as well as the barn, and of course all of the areas that you found in the I'll call them the mountains. What was your process of creating these spaces?
I was also the writer of this project, so I had some time to think about what it was going to mean, and I was working off an amazing novel by Thomas Savage, of the same name as the film. He wrote his book, which was semi-autobiographical, I'd say, though it was also fictionalized, but so he was around in 1925, and he lived on a ranch with his mother, very similar to the story, with two brothers, and the older brother was, I guess, the inspiration for Phil. So we knew that this ranch existed somewhere. And Tanya Sagetchian, my amazing producer and friend, made it her business to do this research, and she found this professor of English in Dillon, which is the town nearby, and he was writing a biography about Thomas Savage. So we asked him if he would take us on a sort of tour, and he was really excited, and we were excited. So we did this whole Montana trip, and we also did what was going to be, a scouting of the area anyway, because we were at that point not sure where we were going to try and shoot it. But we understood it was probably going to be too expensive in Montana. However, I was hopeful that maybe the ranch would be something we could use, I was thinking like, I wonder if I'm going to see the dog there, the whole deal. Anyway, we got there and there was no house. The house had been removed. And we also visited where the house was currently suspended over a great big puddle. And it was a kind of kit home, so it wasn't what I was imagining or what the book imagined either. And that's that disconnect between, what people live and then what they build in fiction. So it was a really important moment to go, okay, fiction's better than truth in this situation. And yeah, I also said to them, and where's the dog? Because I imagined it was some shape or something, they'd seen something. And they said, no, there's no dog. Right. And so, actually, it reminds me of something Annie Proulx said to me when we went to see her, because she wrote the afterword about the book. And she said, the thing you have to understand, everyone needs to understand, is that the West doesn't exist. It's a myth. It's just a myth. And, we get to see that, actually, when you consider that some of the very best Westerns were made in Spain, with Sergio Leone and Clint Eastwood. So it's a mythic space, really. And we began to understand that, we could maybe make the same mythic space with the landscape that we had in New Zealand for a lot less money. We were with Jack Fisk at the time, because he was just helping us out. We hadn't landed on a designer. And he very cleverly showed photographs from New Zealand that we already had to the scout in Montana and said, where do you think we can find this place here? And the scout looked at it and said, I think that's a bit further south from here. Well, he was right, it was a lot further south. And that made us feel like, he's a scout, so that's pretty good. That the New Zealand landscape that we were imagining could stand for Montana actually, would work. So then we used a lot of photographic references, an immense amount of photographic references. I mean, I've got a stack of them that's so big, and made duplicate folders so that everybody in every department could have them. And then, of course, I had my favourites as well. So I use references from the time, and things like really surprise you, like seeing cowboys wearing striped jumpers, that just that's not part of the normal mythic Hollywood cowboys kit. And I mean, also even within the novel, Phil Burbank is joking a lot about the cowhands who spend all their money buying clothes from those ordering systems. You know, when you order your clothes, and like spending everything. All their hard-earned cash on special cowboy shirts, which are modelled on the cowboys now in the movies. So they were starting to quote the movies, you know, at that point. And I mean, I really loved that aspect of the 1925 part of the story. I mean, I'm a cowboy fan too. I used to play those games when I was a kid, so it was a special thrill. And actually, there's in Hollywood, there's a museum for the cowboys here too, and I spent a long time in there. Anyway, a lot of research and just enjoying and the details that it really landed for me, and also, of course, from the novel. And then the challenge was building the house.
Did you know the kind of space that you wanted? For example, that stairway in the house plays such a role, as well as the rooms upstairs, as well as this enormous living room. And how did that all evolve for you?
Well, Grant Major, my designer, is really an extraordinary man. He also worked with me on Angel at My Table. It's his first job, and Lord of the Rings. So he's just this quiet Kiwi legend. And he got a lot of different references as well, and we looked at different houses and we saw how they would look, and then they, you know, digitally put them into the landscape that we'd selected. And there was a lot of decisions to be made, and had to be made quickly because we had to build. You know, if we wanted to, like it was August, we had to start building or something, and or getting the permissions, and it was very high wind factors in that area, and you know, engineers had to sign off it. And so there was a lot of difficulties and a lot of anxiety about whether the building would really happen in time. And then, you know, we'd be standing out in the paddock going like, I guess it's here, you know. Going like, oh, there must be something more technical, you know, some other way of knowing exactly what. And, you know, I'd have the DPRE there, and I was going, is this going to be right for the light? You know, I don't know, let's put the, you know, barn over there, and then let's, you know, we've got to have all the cattle yards as well that had to be made. And I found it actually quite scary. Signing off. Scary, yes.
Because?
Because if you got it wrong, you can't shift these big things, you know.
Yeah. I got it.
Like you have to have the relationship between, you know, what you're looking out the window and then to the barn, like how far is that, you know. Well, obviously you can cheat that somewhat, but you want it to feel about right, even for the actors, for everyone to have that sort of sense of capacity of believing in this world.
Are you using images that may be storyboards for your designers so that they know, like, for example, you were talking about specifically the relationship to the barn and the second floor window when Phil looks out and he sees her drinking, and that's a very specific relationship. And I'm wondering whether you've already preconceived this and are communicating that, or is it evolving for you to say, oh, well, now I see this space, that's how I'll shoot it?
There's a little bit of both, I think. You know, like there's certainly relationships that we needed and sight lines that we needed, that we could tell from the script. And actually Ari Wegner, my DOP, made a massive list of all the sight lines that we needed so we can go around and check them all. And then there was like happen chances that were, you know, like rhythms of the window that, you know, like opens the movie that, you know, like that you discover how to do it later. I mean, I haven't got the sort of brain that can figure everything out in advance. So it's a little bit of finding things and also asking for things, and then other people like Grant Major and his amazing team, you know, offering stuff. I mean, the fountain in the front is like our salute to Jack Fisk. That was his idea.
And I'm wondering that the tree that gets climbed through.
The sacred river place.
Emerge?
Well, it's in the book. You know, it's very much the same in Montana. I mean, willows grow near the rivers everywhere, and we specialise in rivers in New Zealand, and like we've got heaps of them. And there used to be something called the New Zealand Death, which was death by drowning. because they come up and down so much, and that's a very worrying thing, because you're not really sure whether you're going to have the full river or the dry river. Or so one day you scout it and it's like muddy, and I said, "Oh, hey, what's happened to our New Zealand rivers? It's supposed to be really mountain clear, beautiful blue, and it's just like muddy." And I go, "Oh my God, it's really going to be difficult."
But you planned on snow, yes? The snow that you have, you planned on.
Well, thank you for believing in it. The snow did happen in the summer on the tops of the hills, but it just very kindly happened the days that we needed it. But we did fill in a lot with, digitally.
And the two towns, the
Beach and the other town, which is standing in, I guess, for Dylan. Well, in Otago, there's a really cute, what they call historical centre. I think all towns have them. And it's really, I adored it. I thought it was just perfect, and think, oh my God, that's a real gift. And I think New Zealand has not really been colonised that long. It's one of the later colonised countries. So we do have a lot of our historical centres and things are in pretty good order, and of the appropriate period too. And we had a great railway station, Dunedin, so we went there, and we had to build the other town, which we did mostly digitally, but we had the red mill is to hinge it off, and then everything was taken in interiors to a stage in Auckland. But I did ask for some of the, like the Cowboy's Kitchen to be real, so that we could do some inside-outside work that would just help everybody, and the kitchen was also there on the set. And then there was the barn, of course, which was a fantastic area for Phil, and it was his place to remember Bronco Henry. And one of the difficulties when you're adapting a story like this, and you have a character like Bronco Henry, who's really overpowering present, but he's a ghost, and it's like eye of God, and they're describing it all, but that's not going to work in a film. So you have to try and figure visual ways to trigger it. And I had the idea of a shrine with a little lamp and a plaque that was in the barn, and that could be referred to by Phil and cleaned, and
so the saddle was an addition, or was the saddle also in the book?
The saddle was not in the book, in the shrine.
Got it.
And actually, I can't remember what the saddle now was. I'm not sure that the Bronco Henry saddle was what he sat on. I'm not even sure of,
because it's very powerful.
I'm so confused by what I did.
I've got that. Well, thank you, Jane. Denis, you're creating an entire new world. None of us have been there. Well, I think a couple people have been there, but not really a lot of us. How did you go about starting it so that it had your visual imagery, and what was the process of creating the world? The worlds, I should say, because you've got three of them.
My colleagues had the historical reference. Me, I was like in the void. The only thing that I can rely to was the early dreams that I had when I read the book as a kid. Very visceral reading. And to do so, what I did is that there's a part of the process that for me is very fundamental, which is storyboarding. And storyboarding is, even when I write the screenplay myself, is something that is closer to writing than to shooting, in fact. It's a way for me to interpretation of the screenplay. I will storyboard the whole movie, and then very often rewrite after I storyboard, because there's so many ideas. I mean, Blade Runner was almost entirely rewritten after Roger Deakins and I storyboarded the movie. There are so many new ideas that are coming from the images. And I also, when I was young, when I started to dream to be a director, I didn't have a camera. We were drawing movies. I had my best friend and I, we were like drawing the movies that we were dreaming to do. And so where I'm going is that the birth of Dune, the way to approach this, I said to myself, I need to focus and try to go back to those early images, those vivid images I had when I read the book as a kid. And so I said to my storyboard artist that I made most of my movies with Samudeki, a close friend, so close friend that I can fall asleep in front of him. I mean, that kind of strong intimacy. My wife who is with us today keeps saying that I speak 3 languages. I speak French, English, and Udeki. I mean, it's like the way my way of communicating with the storyboard artist is so. We are so close that he can very quickly draw what I have in mind. It's very strange relationship that I developed through many years with him. So the idea is I forbid him. I said, I forbid you to go onto the internet. I want absolute no references. We won't talk about other movies. We won't talk about painters. We won't talk about photographers. I want to try to reach those images. And so the movie was all the design, most of the design and of can be props, can be sets, can be the spirit of a lot of things was born into those early storyboard sessions that try to bring back those images from the.
How did you communicate the 3 worlds? Because Arrakis is different from Atreides, this is different from the Harkonnen. How did you, as you began communicating with your storyboard artists, what were the factors that began to come into your mind to make distinctions between these worlds?
But it's all those civilizations. It was their relationship with nature. The real subject and the real character in Dune is nature, Mother Nature, and I tried to do the same as the way we approach the movie, and it's just they all have all those tribes, if I can say, have different relationship with the way they deal with nature, and that's the way I differentiate them in the process.
And what were they? Can you articulate the differences? Because
but I mean, it's like the Fremen world is a Fremen that is of course in deep harmony, that is embracing, emulate, try to breathe with nature. So that the way, and that's something that we will see more in the second part. That kind of close proximity, the colonizer, that are coming and that built Arrakeen, built a city that is designed to survive to the harsh nature. It's like a resistance. It's some people that are not meant to be there, and that impose themselves, and but need to find artificial protection in order to. So the design of the city of Arrakeen was like an architecture of survival, and the architecture of the Harkonnens. It's a world that is totally disconnected from nature. It's a plastic world. It's a world that is totally artificial. It's a dead world, and that's what I would say.
Got it. And for where the Duke of the Harkonnen sort of exists, that space that he's in, we first see it with all this kind of mist around him, and how did that all evolve? This is Harkonnen, in that world. Do you remember? This is Skarsgård's when he's introduced. Stellan Skarsgård.
But the thing is that the Baron in the book aged very well, in my humble opinion. But the bad guys, I mean, they are really every time they are a caricature of twisting mustache, I did feel that I had to do a lot of work to do on my villain. And on the shape as well. I didn't want him to look like a joke or a caricature or a fat baby or something. I wanted to create a threat. I wanted to create fear. I wanted to create a taciturn character that where we will feel a high intelligence, a paranoid character that will calculate all the time, and that you will be afraid of just by his presence. I wanted to create a silhouette. Very specific silhouette that was designed again with my storyboard artist. I mean, it's something that we found that ape-like gorilla shape of the Baron. Is Sam who finally found it and then gave it to the art department. And I love the prosthetic of the Baron so much. I thought it was so beautiful naked that I decided to rewrite in the storyboard process, to rewrite the first scene to see him naked and to invent this idea of a steam bath, so I can see Stellan Skarsgård in his full grandeur. I was just in love with the naked Baron, and Yeah, that's why. And Stellan too, he really loved the result of it. Yeah, we didn't. Surprisingly, I was expecting to retouch the Baron a lot in CG, but we didn't. It was so well done that they were really. It was a masterwork with the.
Truly. One more about the vehicles, because the vehicles, in fact, like an Arrival, are quite exceptional. We don't expect to see what you are imagining, and it gives us another way of looking at another world. Can you talk about the ornithopters and how they these fabulous flying vehicles evolved?
Yeah, the thing is that it's a book. Sorry, the book Dune is not about technology or gadget that much. It's really about the triumph of the human spirit. It's really about the for those who knows the book, they got rid of of computers. I mean, it's really everything is about the power of the human mind. So I tried to keep the technology, as Frank Herbert did. I tried to keep the technology in the background, or if some elements like the ornithopter, for instance, will be prominent in some scenes, they will look very familiar. They will not be in the way that I wanted my mother to believe that those things were flying for real, and so I really put emphasis on the physicality of it, on the to bring some kind of realism. Very early on, we decided that we will go in the direction of insects. In the book, they are described as birds, but I thought it would look silly, so I really wanted something more muscular, and I insisted that to my VFX crew that we'll need those eye vibrating wings, so it feels. I wanted it to feel as close to an helicopter as possible. So you don't think about it. It flies for real. You don't think it's just you focus on characters and what they are going through.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Thank you. There's so much more to talk about, even design for all of your films. But Paul, this is your past. The Valley, I don't think is what it was in the time you were doing this in 1973. How did you find places like, I don't know if the Tail of the Cock still exists, but the houses of your major characters, and how did you find these and create them? And were they all real, by the way?
Yeah, they were all real. I mean, it's not so bad. You know, the valley, the shape of the valley.
No shame here.
I don't know. I live on one side of the valley. I live in Tarzana. My daughter goes to school in Studio City, so every morning drive her to school and then drop her off and then start scouting. You know, I mean, really on the way back and trying to find stuff that fits. I mean, I was working from a story that was my memory of growing up there at the time, and then another part, the memories and stories of a friend of mine. So there was a real waterbed store that I had as a reference. It was on Ventura Boulevard, right near, Balboa. Great. Okay, so that's what it looks. Still there. It's a tanning salon now. Anybody wants to go. And the Tail of the Cock was a sort of other was a place that I went to as a kid. It's a great restaurant. There's two of them. There was one on La Cienega. There was one on Coldwater in Ventura. And it's long gone, unfortunately. It was sort of bulldozed in the late 80s. But, if you know the valley like I know the valley, you know where to go find the bones of something like that. So it was the mission of going with my production designer, Flo, and Adam, my AD, and taking a phone and mapping out the movie, the joy of that. I mean, I think I probably have about 60-70% of the movie with the two of them playing Gary and Alana, on my phone. And, and that really and the joy of scouting and taking that time and messing around and going into one bathroom stall and trying something like this. Okay, this will be great. Let's go to another one, or getting permission to go to a high school and walking around the high school and shooting it and trying to time it all out and really just mapping the whole thing out, which we were doing anyway, but then became double, triple important to shoot
during the COVID of it all, because on a limited budget, you really want to know your frame and know, well, what are we seeing? Let's make sure that we aren't bringing more cars and more people than we need. Let's really get this mission focused so that we can accomplish it. Yeah.
Do you remember any locations as being more challenging to actually find?
No, there's all. I think Stephen, it's like the period film. It's crosswalks and stoplights, and it's crazy. That is the biggest thing. No, nothing was challenging to find. The thing that can happen when you're making a film, I think certain location managers have a book, and they present you the same old locations. And they just kind of want to get it over with as fast as they can. Sometimes they're like, "There's 6 of these houses. Just pick one." And that won't do. You have to you just drive around, knock on doors, and try to find those things and find things that are stuck in time. It's one of the great joys of being able to make a film in the place where you live, is that there's just the route home from dropping my daughter off at school was filled with limitless possibilities and alleyways that I'd never been down, but I've been down most of them at this point. I lived there for 50 years.
Do you sometimes, as Kenneth does, look for a certain kind of space? I'm thinking specifically of a scene where I guess Gary ends up walking out and getting in the car and drives away, and Alana goes after him. And it's a fair complex move in terms of getting up from the table, going around a corner, coming back into the room, going out. Do you look for that? I mean, or is that, oh wow, I found this, and now I'm going to sort of stage it that way? Where's that dynamic?
I don't know. There's those times when you're writing something and you get something stuck in your mind that you want to try to make happen, and I think the trick is knowing when to abandon that, because something else is right in front of your face that is like, it's screaming at you like, dummy, look at me, I'm standing right here, there's a great shot. So it's that kind of combination of attack to tell the story in a certain way, but openness to what might be there. And by the way, that's a great it's a great way to work. I mean, I've worked the other way too. Thinking of working with Jack Fisk, you're creating a world, and you're like, it is nerve wracking. You're like, wait, from the ground up? I don't want to do. Right? I like it's. I want to be able to walk in someplace and be lucky enough that the sun is coming through the window in a certain way. When you're great, let's make sure we're back here at 2:00 because that's when it looks good. To really map out a schedule. To these locations as well, be open to what they provide naturally. You always like a location better when you walk in and the sun is coming through the window. You're like, this is what we want. Or that or just how often you walk into a location that's fantastic and you say to the family, please don't touch anything, and then they clean the whole place up by the time you get there.
Did the John Peters house? Where was that?
John Peters' house was a house that I was aware of. It's up Balboa. For any of you people that live anywhere near Encino, if you keep going up Balboa, at the end of the street there is a house that Lyle Wagner built in the early '70s in a kind of classic Valley Tudor style. Very popular for Southern California at a certain time, and we were in a situation where we found the house, and a guy had bought it and was refurbishing it, so it was kind of half gutted, half complete, and we said, would you mind waiting and pausing this, and we can actually kind of build a bedroom in the style that we want. The bones are all there, and he was gracious enough to let us do that. So we kind of had. It was a kind of a mix of a set built within a.
And it was on a hill, so that it did play into where the truck is going to go.
Yeah, no, it was on a hill, and all those hills are where I live in Tarzana, so that's great. Putting your kids to bed and going to Scout at 9:00 just down the road is, I highly recommend it. It's great. You're back home by 10:00 and you've got the locations. You're like, okay.
I want to talk about rehearsal with all of you and how you use it and particularly on this film, maybe it's different. Paul, what was rehearsal? You had two people who had never acted before, if I'm correct on that. Well, Lana's done a lot of videos, so I guess she's done that, but certainly not him. What did you do for rehearsal in terms of before shooting?
Well, we did. I mean, it's not as extreme as Drive My Car, but I really that kind of sequence in that when they're rehearsing the Chekhov rang a little bit about that idea of reading a script without anything on it and just reading it and making sure it's something that I really like doing. Not as extreme as that, but that rang some bells. But I think for them it was just getting to know the dialogue and getting to know not just the dialogue for one scene at a time, but knowing the entire script before we started shooting, as if it was a play. And the idea there was that because they hadn't done it before, that the over-prepared would be better than trying to cram to learn a scene the night before. That once the avalanche and speed of a movie shoot starts happening, that they would probably be like, trying to finish a paper on Sunday night before school. That was a horrible place to be. So it was really about 3 months of them being together without me and practicing their lines and doing whatever it was. And then we went once or twice to the real locations to just kind of give them a sense of the space, but to try to not overdo it. I mean, maybe they overdid it when they were together alone. They're just practicing their lines. And they were very paranoid as well, because they did not want to. They did not want to be the thing holding this up. They wanted to be great. They wanted to be great for me, for the crew, for everybody. They did not want to be the ones that we were waiting for. It was
Talk
great.
about but this is an interesting idea that they work together on the whole script as two actors together, where you were not present for a lot of that. When did you get to see, quote, their work?
Well, I mean, at the beginning, we all read it together and we talked about it, and it was more of, are there any questions? And then I think for Cooper, that I would hear lines that just couldn't come out of his mouth right, and it was not. And it was so the writing has to change to fit him. You try long enough to see. It's a pretty good line. Is he going to get it? And you go, he's not going to get it. It just doesn't. It's not coming out of him. So write it better for him, for his mouth to come out of him. So just making those adaptions and getting those early enough that they could. I had to trust them and put them together.
Since some of the scenes are long, and don't have lots of cuts, even the very beginning scene, that long tracking shot with the two of them and where you're introduced to them, do you remember either rehearsing on set when they did that or beforehand? I'm using that as an example.
Well, that's a perfect example of doing the movie once with Adam and Flo on a phone at the high school and breaking. It's very long. It's probably about 12 pages of dialogue, and sort of mapping it out to realize we can do 12 pages of dialogue in 3 shots. Here's number 1, and it'll go from here to here roughly, So this is your zone to get all this dialogue in, and then here's section 2. By the time we come around and we meet Sasha, that's zone 2. And then zone 3, this is how it'll play out. So that had been roughed in for them beforehand, and then shooting it. That the reality of that is I don't know, when you're shooting the first scene of a movie or the last scene of the movie, there becomes this unfortunate tenseness. Because everybody knows, this one's going to be in the movie, right? Because, and I can remember being a really bad director that day, and they must have smelled the fear coming from me, where I had been nothing but the elder statesman, giving confidence and everything else, and there's something about the look in my eye must have made them feel like there's something's different about today. He looks scared and it doesn't feel good. And they were terrible for like the whole morning. They were stiff, and it was this sort of great panic. And it's a horrible situation to be in that you can't really fight your way out of, except to realize that, well, we're here for 2 days and there's still one more morning. And if we can get something under our belt that feels good, then we can attack this again. Because then you start scrounging around to the actors. You're like, that's fine. You know, we've got tomorrow. And that's like, well, okay, so obviously this is shit. So you're just like digging, you know, deeper and deeper.
And
you know.
And tomorrow happened.
Tomorrow happened, and it was great. But the thing about working with teenagers, I think, is important is to usually if you can just start your day at about 3:30 when they're finally awake.
Did you really start rescheduling?
No. I did. We did. I think we did start to realize that they're not really awake until the afternoon. So maybe we just try to push everything back a little bit.
Great.
Really.
Denis, what rehearsal process did you have on Dune?
What I need when I work with new actors, I mean the actors, is to build a relationship. They are all different. I will need to adjust myself to each of them to understand how to bring the best out of them. So what I do is that I have long sessions in my office with them where we go through the lines and talk about characters. But the most important thing for me is, of course, as Paul said, to adjust the dialogue, because what I write is not Shakespeare. No? I mean, it's the most important thing is that it comes that it sounds natural. But where I was going with that, it's about understanding who I have in front of me. Yeah, it's really to build a relationship. That's the most important thing. I don't do rehearsal in general.
In terms of, for example, working with Timothy on this one-on-one, do you remember how the two of you found this character? How Paul
the
got
idea is that
discovered?
all the intellectual process needs to happen in prep for me. Once we are on set it's too late for questions, or it's too late. I mean, it's a very on set. It's very visceral, and so I'm trying to dig all the questions and then to answer to everything. And Timothy is a brilliant mind, and he had tons of questions about to attack a scene, and it's all a long discussions with him and to establish a relationship again. So,
and in terms of his creating this character, were you in an improvisational stage as you were working with him before you started shooting in these one-on-ones? I'm really interested.
I go through the lines with each of them, but there's no. I don't. Sometimes I'm wondering if it's because I'm lazy or because I like to keep that kind of period of strong spontaneity in front of the camera, specifically with great actors. I don't feel the need to rehearse, honestly, but I need the need to hear the dialogues in their mouth, to adjust it, and to try to understand who is in front of me again. I'm repeating the same thing since you asked me the question, but that's the only thing interesting I can say.
But I'm interested in, is Rebecca Ferguson who plays his mom, because of the powers that these characters have, which are not necessarily our human powers yet, maybe we'll get them, but not yet. How did you talk about the business of the voice or the business of having visions? What was the discussion so that they owned it?
The truth, the idea here is that for the voice, I didn't want them to. It was an act of authority, of course, and I knew that it's something that will be done on post. I did not figure it out exactly how it will sound like, honestly, as I shot. I knew I didn't want to do anything gimmicky with the actors. I wanted them to act as natural as possible, and then I will deal with that in post-production. That's the way I knew that there was this idea of inner voice, the power of grandmothers. That I knew about how to achieve it. I was still trying to figure it out. About the visions, It's a no, I'm not sure if I can talk about that here. It involved hallucinations, experience, teenagers' experience.
Listen, we were planning on actually having everyone have spice before they came here,
But I will say this: sometimes life is very strange, and the truth is that one thing that tremendously helped me to direct Timothy is my son had cooked a banana cake few months before I shot the movie, and the banana cake was very spicy, and I had the worst bad trip of my life, but it tremendously helped me. No, it sounds stupid, but it's good to experience things yourself sometimes. And that bad trip on marijuana it deeply helped me to direct Timothy in the visions, to explain to him the state I was looking for, and he strangely, when I mentioned the banana cake experience to Timothy, he got it. So here's the truth. Don't try this. Voilà.
act it, don't be it. Okay, I'll let that go for a second. Jane, there are incredibly powerful performances by your actors, and oftentimes in silence. Some of what they don't say has as much effect as what they do say. And I'm interested in what rehearsal process you went through before you started shooting.
Yeah, well, I had 4 really amazing actors, like seasoned and capable, including Cody Smith-McPhee, who kind of stunned me. I mean, in the audition, I realized, oh my God, this is going to be better than the book. This young man has understood this character, and he had all the philosophical backstory for how Peter would understand things and see things, and he was a gift. So the character that I thought had the greatest journey to make was Benedict Cumberbatch with Phil Burbank, because they're really, very different from each other, fortunately. And Ben and I started to talk about what would we do, what did he need, what did I think he needed, what did he think he needed to bridge that gap. There was all the obvious things like being able to play banjo, being able to, or to some degree, or look like he could. And he's got an amazing facility for doing a lot of different things. And on the ranch, being able to actually plait the rope. He did the, time in Montana cowboy camp, where he really did castrate as he came back saying, I castrated 11 deer. So he knew how to do it. And I think those sorts of things actually are quite deeply important to give you confidence. Horse riding, he knew already a bit about horse riding. Horse, yeah. And then there's just this other aspect. I just had this instinct that we should try something a little bit odd or different, and to try and get into those deep spaces, like the secrets that Phil's life basically inhabited, the area of grief, lost love. And I was trying to think how we were going to get there. And I asked a friend, do you know any therapists that work with, psyche stuff with actors or anything like that? And she said she did. And that her name was Kim Gillingham, and I met her just, off the cuff, and she seemed like not a spooky person, a nice woman. And so I thought, I think I'm going to give this a go. So I did it first so that we could see what it was like. It was like working with dreams, and she explained that, like, if you want to work with your psyche, you've got to throw it some chum. So that you can get the creatures from the deep up to the surface. And I don't think I've ever been helped by a process as much in my directing. and sense of really going as far as I can, you know, into the characters and into the story, as I was by this process. It was incredible. I mean, it dealt with my anxiety about just directing anyway, so I had a lot of dreams around that. Like, just, you know, doing crazy things and not knowing what I was doing. And the dreams helped reveal, like, oh yeah, you're just really anxious, you know. You should make some lists and just go through them, and, you know, because I just had these repetitive dreams. I don't know if you guys have them with fear, really. And it was like nothing would move forward, the same old fearful footsteps, you know. And then with this dream that had been revealed with the work with Kim, I'll tell you the dream anyway. It was about this horse, this amazing looking horse. And I was kind of proud to be riding on it, you know, but I didn't know the horse at all, so I was like showing off really, and I was going down this cliff path, like a bridle path that just got smaller and smaller, and the horse was very, you know, excitable, and as the path got closer, narrower and narrower, I was thinking, this is going to be difficult because I don't think I can reverse out of this. And there was really, in the end, in my dream, nowhere for the horse to go, you know, and there was just certain death. Anyway, when I was... It seems like such an obvious dream, but... you know, with someone to facilitate me getting my way out of my fear, I realized, like, I know about horses, you know, like, well, what I should have done was get to know the horse, do all that groundwork, you know, bend its back, bend this way, bend that, get it to listen to me by getting to, you know, touching the horse all over, and then just creating this relationship between the horse and me. And then, you know, I would have a chance. The horse would be listening. Going down that thing, we could reverse out, something would happen, you know. Basically, it was a metaphor for my film. You know, I had to get to know my film. I had to get to know everything about it. And then, you know, I had to figure out ways to do that, because one thing to say, oh, I've got the script here, now I've got to get to know it, you know. How? You know, it's difficult. And that was one of the ways that I helped myself, but Benedict working with this character also, and also me working to understand Phil, you know, went to some places where I could get to talk to Phil, and she would facilitate me having a conversation with Phil, or Phil telling me things, like, I was doing all the talking, okay, a little complicated. She'd say, what has Phil got to tell Jane about what she needs to do? And out of me would come this voice says, "Oh, she's got to get dirty." Yeah, she can take off her little white coat. She wants to tell my story. Yeah. And I said,
did Benedict stay in character so that you would address him as Phil all the time?
Yes, I didn't. I don't remember if I said, "Hey, Phil." I'm sure I said Ben or something, and he might have said Phil. But he did stay in character, and it was really helpful, I think, for him, because Benedict is a very pleasing person. He likes to be kind and, you know, lovely to everybody, and can I help you and do this? And I said, oh, no, that's all got to stop. It's you don't help anybody with anything. And if anybody offers you anything, or you never say thank you. And you say no to almost everything. Just say, you know, 5 no's a day, please, you know. And he also did this work with Kim. He said it was transformative for him. And it seems that Kirsten and Jesse also have a dream person that they frequently work with. It just takes the work to a new level and depth. And with these, you know, seasoned professionals, that's what they're always looking for, that extra interest and something to really ground their knowing about the character. So when they came to rehearsal, and we did 3 weeks of it, they all sort of packed their bags a little bit with what they had, and it was quite hard to persuade them to unpack and let whatever happened between us as a group have some influence on it. But they did do it, and what we did during that time is, like, over the years, I now really don't rehearse the scenes very much. But what I try to do is, or I try to copy actually what I can understand that Francis Ford Coppola did in The Godfather, and I've watched his rehearsals and what he did, and because I think the performances in that film are just like so extraordinary. And you believe everybody so much. They're just so grounded, and nobody's making apparently any effort. They just are. And I think it was, possibly the golden time of the method performance or method work that had been emerging from New York. And what he would do was quite often do a lot of improvisation with backstories, or improvisation, like just a very simple thing, like everybody would attend dinner. And then you just get the energy in your body about how you fit into this group. The scene is not in the film or anything, but you'd start to discover who you are with all the other people, and there's a deeper and deeper trust, I think, of the of how you sense yourself to be in the story and in relationship to the different characters.
Did Cody join that process?
Cody did. They were all there. Yeah, Cody and Jesse, Kirsten, and then we started off with Ben and Cody. And I mean, the other thing was that what I really love is that, as you were saying, basically you're building a relationship, building a friendship and a trust with them, and you get to know each other, so that there is, that.
I heard you speak specifically that you asked Kirsten and for them, for Phil and Rose to not know each other, not say. Is that?
Well, they didn't have very many scenes together, in actual fact, so that was pretty easy. Like Kirsten was always making fun of Ben that he wasn't very frightening. That's not very helpful, Kirsten. She says, "Well, he's got to know, So, yeah, I mean, they're not dolls. They just say what they like a lot of the time.
Got it. Well, thanks, Jane. Stephen, new kind of rehearsal for you? Because I know you've gone through various films and used rehearsal and not. Where was this one?
All the rehearsal was focused on dancing and singing. I don't rehearse. I consider the first take rehearsal. I don't direct actors in pods or in groups. I give individual direction because, if I make an adjustment after a take or two, if I make an adjustment, I don't want the other actors understanding what new is going to come at them that wasn't there in take one. So I do all of the direction really independently, individually, and I do it very quietly. The thing that I'm most interested in is what is the actor going to bring to the character that I haven't thought of yet. I'm just looking to be surprised. And I was very lucky on this story because everyone was fiercely independent. They had really strong ideas about themselves, especially Mike Feist, who played Riff. He was incredibly independent in his ideas about how to play this guy. And I waited for him to come to me with ideas because I ran out of ideas when I first met him in rehearsal. He was so smart and he was so on top of the role, and he had so many different ways he wanted to play it that he was sort of a live wire, and I just felt that my best job would be to service the film was to step out of his way and let him do whatever he felt like doing. And the example, there's a scene in the bar where he's going to purchase a gun. And the Irish bartender, who knew his father very well, is kind of fucking with him, and at one point just takes the gun and points it at him, and while the camera's rolling, and this wasn't scripted and this wasn't expected, and there was no line written for it, Mike Feist, playing Riff, just leaned forward and pressed his own forehead to the barrel of the gun, and said, "You might as well." And that's because he was the embodiment of this very desperate teenager, sort of at the end of his wits, at the end of his hope, that was willing to accept a bullet, take a bullet in that moment, and never go through with the rumble that he had actually initiated. In our story, it's the Jets that start the fight, not the Puerto Ricans. And so when I meet an actor like this, it's gold. It's like being a gold miner, and where I don't have to use a pick or a shovel or anything. I could just sit back and he fills the trough. He just fills the trough. He just like the sleuth in Treasure of Sierra Madre. I mean, that gold came from the mountain of Mike Feist every single day.
When did you know?
What?
When did you know that Mike Feist was going to be able to do this? On meeting? Or
It was sort of, I knew it the first time I met him. The first time he read for us. First he danced. The process was this. I auditioned everybody on tape. I saw all of their singing auditions first. And then all of the dance was done live. I went to a big dance rehearsal studio at Lincoln Center. Ironically, the place that they threw all the Puerto Ricans out in order to build the Lincoln Center, and here we are rehearsing at the Lincoln Center for the first time. And here was, and that was the second tranche, or the second tier of getting the part was, could they follow Justin's steps? And Justin didn't give them the steps ahead of time for them to practice. It's just like Chorus Line. You've all seen Chorus Line. They show up and they just learn the steps. They have some kind of a dancer somehow can memorize these steps the second they're shown, one time only, and then they have to perform. And I got to go through a whole new. I was like, when I made the movie, I was 72. I'm 75 now. I was 72 when I started making the movie. I'm seeing things I never experienced before. I'm seeing an entirely different medium that is time-worn, much longer than movies, much longer than television. This goes way back hundreds of years. And I'm suddenly a part of this magic that's been going on for hundreds of years. And I was mystified by it, and I was intimidated by it, and I was enchanted by it. And so I just did what I've always been taught to do by my parents, which is to shut up and listen as much as you possibly can. And I listened, I learned from the best. Justin Peck is the best, and so that was the rehearsal basically. But when it came to the acting, we had one table read. We sat the entire cast down, and they all read the script around a table.
Singing or not?
Everything. Singing. If they danced, they kind of moved a little bit like this, There was a couple of funny moments where they were trying to do cool from their chairs. It's very hard to do cool from their chairs, but they did. And then the other thing was just as the table read reached the inevitable conclusion, which is obviously all out of Romeo and Juliet, which is what Jerome Robbins conceived with Leonard Bernstein and Arthur Lawrence and Stephen Sondheim. This was going to be a retelling of Romeo and Juliet. So as the table read got closer to the end, all the actors started crying. And so that took me right out of it immediately, because they're speaking and they're weeping at the same time, which is immediately they always say it's the kiss of death, because if you're making a comedy and the crew laughs, nobody in the preview audience will laugh. The second the crew laughs, it's not funny. It really isn't. And I thought, well, does that apply to musicals too? They're all crying. Is this the kiss of death for this movie? Will nobody cry when we finally show the film? And so it was an interesting. It was something that Tony Kushner really rightfully insisted on. He wanted to hear his words read by the actors. I would have ordinarily not had a table read for West Side Story or anything, really. But I did it for Tony, and we learned a lot. We learned a lot about pacing, about what should be cut. But when it comes to rehearsal, everybody just sort of gathered the first day of shooting, and the first thing we shot was the song. The first thing we shot was Behind the Bleachers, where Tony and Maria come behind the bleachers, and they do the minuet. That was the first thing shot on the entire.
But you were just about to tell us also how Mike Feist made an impression on you, because here he is now. You've seen him on tape, and he's now just learned this dance number, and he's come forward. Do you remember what it was that said this is going to be gold?
Well, just that you just know it when you may meet somebody in real life, and we're all filmmakers to every degree of the arts, and we all do it in this room. And even when you're sitting talking to people you've never met before, there's always that one person that you can't take your eyes off of. It's like something stands out. Something is just there's an energy that pulls your attention away to an individual or several individuals. And Mike had an energy that was impossible. Ariana DeBose, Ari had an energy when she came in to meet me for the first time. I had actually met her. I didn't realize it, but I met her backstage after I saw Hamilton for the first time. In Hamilton, she's the bullet that goes across the stage. And I don't really meeting her. She was very quiet, and she was sort of in the shadows. And this time, she did the same thing. She was in the rehearsal. She danced for us. I already knew that she could sing. She had gotten a Tony nomination for playing Donna Summer several years before that. And yet there was something about her energy that kept pulling me over to her. And she was doing everything she could to disappear in a room of 90 dancers and singers. It's like Ringling Brothers. You have to imagine that Patricia Delgado, Justin's now wife, but the assistant choreographer, is rehearsing 15 dancers in one area. Craig, the third assistant choreographer, is rehearsing another 15 dancers. Justin's with about 30. And I'm trying to have conversations with some of the people that were pulling out of the line. It is just like Roy Scheider at the beginning of Bob Fosse's All That Jazz. It's just like the beginning of All That Jazz. And I just thought that was movies. I thought that's what you do. You make this stuff up, and it's visual, and there's a lot of colors, and you put the camera anywhere and have people leaping over the camera. That's what a musical is, you know. I didn't realize that, no, this is what they really do. And so when we came time to make the movie, and it was sort of my turn, I just did what I always do, which is essentially say, roll and action. And all the adjustments I make is after everybody, because when actors say the words for the first time, they may rehearse together at home. They may go out and rehearse together. They can do that. I encourage that, but not kids. I don't let kids rehearse. I don't let parents rehearse with their kids. That is the kiss of death. But but I find that when I'm on the set and we're all on the set and it all begins, there is a kind of virginity that is lost the first time the camera rolls, and you can't get that on take two. And Sidney Lumet, who I was honored to know, not well, but I was honored to know him, he only did 2 takes. And he only did a second take if something technically went wrong. And in the extraordinary event that his lead, like Henry Fonda, was producing his first movie, 12 Angry Men, maybe he did 4 or 5 takes because Henry Fonda said, "I'm your boss. We're doing more than 1 take." But Lumet rehearsed like crazy. He rehearsed like a theater director. Right. But only did 1 or 2 takes. And the reason he did 1 or 2 takes, he told me years and years ago, is because it's the petit mort, you know, that little death that happens the first time something happens, and then you have to move on.
Got it, Stephen. Talking about rehearsal, Ken, I think you come from a world of rehearsals, obviously theater. What did you do in this picture in terms of rehearsal? And you also have, again, a boy who's never, I guess, acted before.
Yeah.
How did you handle rehearsals?
Well, I found that I've tried to sort of evolve with it and not necessarily insist that I have them. One thing I learned, or feel as though I've learned, is that it's never great. I used to rehearse. It's usually a contractual thing, or you've only got the actors and they come in 3 days before they're due to start. They come in a week before because of money or time. I haven't found that that's very good because that's right at the sharp end of decision making about being about to start shooting. So
she's not leaving.
No, exactly. So I try and do it if I can. I would try and negotiate to have the actors maybe a month ahead of the start of shooting, and maybe for a week, maybe, and then all of the things that come out of rehearsal don't have that horrible wire up the backside of you're going to start shooting in 4 or 5 days' time, and you can action some of the things that come out of it, the prop that is wanted, or perhaps the help with an accent or something, or a bit of research or a bit of reference or whatever. And as you say, you get to know people a bit and try and sort of take that side, take some of the pressure off needing to come up with something. So like base camp is, I'll perhaps get to know. My instinct is this person doesn't like it if I say more than half a dozen words. I can see their eyes crossing with boredom, or this one wants to talk and this is great, and then sometimes you've got to manage it a bit because maybe the other one isn't talking because they are talking. Maybe talking doesn't matter. Maybe you don't have to talk, And like James is saying, I felt as though I developed the idea that don't rehearse the scenes very much, but find a way to make something real. So, for instance, in Belfast, one of the things I did, we had them for about a week together in various forms. COVID was always a bit of an issue, and people being in different places. But we had them a week, about a couple of weeks before we started. And so one of the challenges was, okay, how do we create, beyond obviously their professional ability to imagine, that Judy and Kieran as Granny and Pop have known each other and been married for a long, long time. So the same with Jamie and Katrina, and also the boy. One of the things was from my point of view, was to say, look, just so you know, although I'm perfectly willing to answer these questions, Jamie's first question to me was, how much did your father bet? So the character in the movie goes to the booking shop quite a lot. There's an issue about back tax, and basically wanted to get a sense of what was the gambling part of my father. And I said, well, I can take you through that. And yes, he did have a problem with the tax people, and yes, he did like to have a bet and everything. I could take you through all of that. However, I think the goal for me would not be for you to do a sort of encyclopedic delve into how can you do a documentary about my parents, but I would love, may I start instead by asking you about your own father, you know, but simply to start to talk about what you notice or what you have, you know, intuited or inherited or whatever. And so the beginnings of rehearsal was to say, look, the goal is not to get inside my head. I would now like you to own this. So let's talk about families, not this family, although you know, it's not exclusive. If that's the way you'd like to do it, I can give you some specifics, but I reckon that'll be limiting in terms of what I would like, you know, because as you say, I definitely want, you know, there's a lot of people here, I'd like all of your talent, please. You know, my goal will be to direct it. I'd point in one direction, all that stuff, and you can send it there, etc. But with Judy and Kieran, Judy's eyes are not very good, so she can't really read, to be perfectly honest. When she decided she wanted to do it, I had to go down and read the whole script to her. One more terrifying experience. Yeah, do all the. Plus, I'd never read it out loud myself anyway, so I was also kind of hearing my first draft, and my audience is named Judi Dench. Thank you very much. 87 years, squinty billion Oscar nominations, and every prize known to man. And a great artist, and although a very nice person and very polite, I would say someone with a ruthless artistic conscience. So I would say that the very real possibility existed and hung over this meeting the word N-O. You know, thank you very much, it's very nice, but I don't think it's for me. But she listened to it, and then she said, and I got very choked reading it, and she was very, very sensitive and kind about that, in as much as she didn't mention it. It happened. When we got to the first day of rehearsal, she wanted to ask about a journal in the movie called The People's Friend. The People's Friend was a little magazine that my granny read every week. It was a quasi-religious journal, but essentially it was a group of romantic stories. There was a page of romantic stories per sheet of the thing. And so, because she couldn't read, and she didn't know what The People's Friend was, and she'd never met Kieran, I said, for what it's worth, if you could bear it, Kieran, could you read one of the stories from The People's Friend? We have an edition of it here, to Judy. And so we had to be separate, you know, physically because of COVID. So Kieran started reading, and he has a very, as you hear or know if you've seen the film, and you know his work, he's a marvellous actor, been marvellous in films for Paul and Stephen. And he's got a wonderful, soulful Irish voice. He's very sort of, you know, full of beautiful colours. It's a story, this you know, daft magazine in a way, but very important to my granny, about a woman who is the sole daughter of the house in a remote Scottish village, where a young man who lodges with them stays through her upbringing. Little does he know she's fallen for him. She carries a torch for him. He goes away to become a doctor, and eventually comes back and has never understood or even noticed this young woman until finally something happens and she helps him out, and he realizes that the woman he's been looking for all his life and the man that she's been looking for all her life, they're in the same front room, as it were. And it's like a sort of a Mills and Boon romance. It's very "Be Still My Beating Heart." It's that kind of thing. Anyway, it's just a page. It takes 5 minutes to read. Kieran does a wonderful job. Then he has to go to the loo. The door closes and she goes, "I've just fallen in love with him." And so
this is a good rehearsal.
So that was a good rehearsal, she said. And so while he was in the loo, she just went on a list of, isn't he marvellous? And that voice, oh my God. And that hair, I can't see it very well, but it's very long, very oily, very nice. He's very exotic, isn't he? So by the time he walks back in from the loo, she's in love with Pop. And then the goal was to try and let young Jude, young 10-year-old Jude, sort of be aware of that, be aware of the fun of that, and then try and do, as you were saying, I did want him, it's such a balance. So I wanted him to know his lines because I said to everybody, it's COVID, we're going to change things. If there's a great piece of weather, we'll change, we'll do the scene from Thursday and you'll need to be ready. But please, Jude's mum, Shawneen, don't get him all lickety-spick on this. It's just a sort of a level of familiarity that means he won't do what happened that morning you were describing. Because I did have one experience of that with him, and it's horrible seeing a 9-year-old boy. I felt like one time when I was at school and there'd been homework to hand in, I hadn't heard it and I hadn't got it ready, and there I was in the class, and I felt so terrible about it. I saw one morning where the kid was, the lip was about to go and the tears were about to start, and so I realized we had to let him know in advance, but we couldn't over prepare him. So then when it did come to shooting, the goal was often to just put the camera back here, not even necessarily tell people what it was about. And we did not rehearse. We just let them go.
And in creating the family, because just like you created Palma, in creating the family that you is part of, how did James and Katrina spend some time with him before you started shooting so that it was a family?
Well, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? I think one of the things that I've noticed is sometimes with young people, people can make, and actors with the best intentions can make an over effort to be new best friend. I've been on a couple of things where I've seen the kids spoiled. By the end of the movie, they're gone. Everything that was beautiful is gone because with the best of intentions, there's been an over something or other. And you made it too, I mean, it's not, Jesus, it's amazing. And a kid is being in the center of a movie, he sees all this going on. This is a smart lad. He knew the whole thing was on his shoulders. So did I. Jesus Christ. So I didn't want to overburden him. And somehow Jamie got 3 kids of his own. Katrina, who was just about to be a mama, but anyway, just intuitively understood is just try and find the way to be as real as possible. Keep just like we're all going to work. We're all going to work, and this is the work that we do. We have certain things we've got to do. We do this, and our props team are going to bring these for us, and the people are going to paint this, and they're all doing the same thing, slightly different departments. So they kept that real. He also saw their bonding moment was, and this is often, I think, very helpful, is they had an activity. So first afternoon, after Kieran had done his reading session, that afternoon they were dancing. So they had to learn a routine, and that's a vulnerable making thing. And Jude was there for that, and so he understood somehow there was a normalizing thing. People doing their work, being vulnerable and sort of professional about it, and keeping it at a kind of medium temperature, not to deny joy and not to deny people caring about it and getting worked up, but somehow finding some positive middle way that this boy could negotiate and find was relatively normal.
In terms of performance of the boy, there are some moments that are pretty astounding. Some are complex, like that opening 360-degree shot. But there are also some simple ones, and I'm wondering how they happen. Like when his mother opens the door after he's stolen the soap, and his face is in utter horror. I have no idea how that moment happened, but I'd be interested to know.
Well, he does have a very, very natural quality. He's got genuine humor himself. He's a funny lad in life, so we tried not to get in the way of that. I was saying to Stephen the other day, it's the God's honest truth. When we were trying to find him, we saw 300 self-tapes from young fellas all over the island of Ireland. And Lucy Bevan and Emily Brockman, our casting directors, early on said, "Can we show you this?" And it was your screen test for Henry Thomas for the role in E.T., which you may have seen. If you haven't, I warmly recommend your both the film and the screen test.
It's a good.
But the screen test to which I refer, I don't know whether you kindly allowed it to be up.
No, it's everywhere
on
now.
The interweb,
it's out there. Yeah.
But both what you said and how the child responded was something I have very strongly had in mind as I was trying to find a way to talk to Jude as well.
Right.
And so it was so much was sort of about getting out of the way, as is always, or at least it's my experience. When you can somehow allow the nature to occur, then I mean, the person that Judi Dench at 87, with all her art and craft, the person she made for on day one was Jude Hill at 9 years old. That's who she wanted to build a relationship with, and that's the one who she wanted to see the sort of the reality of, the in the moment of, the presence of, and so. There was an element to it which was just trying to let the kid be as he was, and in so doing, he became a kind of beacon for all the others, with Jamie, Katrina, and Kieran all following Judi Dench's lead of keep an eye on him, because he's you'll have to keep up with this kid, because otherwise, because if he stays like this and we're not careful, we'll get caught out acting. And suddenly we'll be the ones who look like we're schmacting when the kid is like a little ding in the middle of it. So Judi, I think, was there, and you could see her as Judi started to do scenes with him, she started to do less and less and less. Yeah. Cause she just started to take things away.
The scene on the bus.
In order to make sure. Yeah, she was magic with him in that. By that stage, of course, they were like sort of granny and grandson. They really made each other laugh as well.
Did you use 2 cameras on that?
Did I use 2 cameras? Yes, I did. Yes, that was for yes.
Because you had the profile of him.
That's right, and that's why we rather than come round or make extra time coverage, you had to try and grab it at the same time. That was an interesting one, because you're thinking, who do you because it's a great scene for her. You don't want to. I want to make it all about whatever makes her, whatever, but you don't want to overwork him. And what I used to do. If this isn't, I don't know if you did this or any of you do this, but for instance, there's a lovely mood in the scene in the hospital between Kieran and the kid, and I said to Kieran, what do you want to do? It's your scene really, but he's obviously key. I'm happy to shoot you first, and then I'm happy for you to go away if you'd like, because I'm going to be an age with him. And I don't want to have. In fact, he can be off camera, and we can just please work it any which way you'd like. He'll be here, but I could also be here as well if that's better. Whatever lets you do anything that is the additional colouring, as it were. We'll capture the moment of the happening, but there'll be an element of just we'll have to. It's a very long, complicated scene for him, and so there I found myself. Kieran did head off. Because there was it was hours and hours and hours of talking to the boy and doing the lines and suggesting some things, doing different things off for the script, etc. And then when the flame was absolutely underneath, we yelled, "Kieran, back!" And then we tried to get the pair of them together with 2 cameras.
Got it. Great. By the way, that door opening, that moment, that fright, do you remember how the kid got there?
He's just a funny boy. And
so it was just that moment.
I'm afraid that's all him. Jude Hill, thank you very much, I'd say.
And does this include, too, there's a wonderful moment when the father is left, and it's a profile of the boy where he's alone. And I don't know if you know the shot.
I do, no, I remember it because it's one of, we were touching on this about relative to something else. That was one of the moments where the, where you just, you see something, and it felt like, I don't know what he did, but the quality of the look, it felt like it was, I felt like I was watching the crossover from childhood to adulthood. I don't know he knew what he was acting, but somehow he seemed to embody it in a way that was so heartbreaking because it felt so lonely.
Had you told him something?
He was aware. We played him this Van Morrison version of Carrickfergus, which is an old Irish air, and it's Van Morrison and the Chieftains playing the harp on that as well. A great Irish band. And it's just one of those things that, like Danny Boyle, there's a superior remark Noel Coward made once about the potency of cheap music, and with Carrickfergus, it's just the father leaves, it's dawn once again. And he says, if I could swim over the sea to get you, I would. And the kid has that. So he was listening to that, and that thing of that sort of that separation. I don't know what it's like for you, but the the thing of I don't know how you say cheerio to people you love. I wave the whole time.
Got
I
it.
wave until you can't see them, and it was that kind of moment. And the kid got it in a way that
Boy,
just
the music provided it.
yeah, it broke my heart. That was one of the ones we
Got
you
it.
have to walk away for a bit.
Got it.
Definitely have to walk away for a bit.
Stephen, there's a moment, and again, this is about performance because I'm going to ask each one of you about a specific and maybe how you may have gotten it. When Anita is singing the song "A Boy Like That," there's a moment when she breaks down that is so arresting, and it's in the midst of a song, so it's
Yes.
talk about it.
Well, this A Boy Like That was done live. It was live singing, and every shot was live. We did one protection take for playback, and also as a guide track. We did do one as a guide track. Every single setup had one playback, which we never used. Everything else was done live. And when you sing live as opposed to playback, even though, as I said earlier, you're putting your heart into the song, even though you hear your own voice in your earbuds, you're still putting your heart into it. But when you know it's live and you can really hear yourself, and the only thing in your ear is the orchestra, turned down very low, and you hear the other person, there is something that happens, which is why we hire great actors to be in our movies, because it's something that's beyond my understanding. It's something beyond any of our understandings. There is something that could be called kismet, or it just could be called sort of divine inspiration that occasionally happens, that we also call it magic. And you walk away when you feel that the magic has happened, because magic like that only is going to happen once. And that song had so many magic moments for both Rachel Zegler, who plays Maria, and Ariana DeBose. But they got to a point in the song, because I was shooting a lot of it in long sustained masters, so they could work up to these moments. So they didn't have to camera cut with me. They didn't have to get to a point and stop. They actually went beyond what I used. So they're actually singing beyond where I actually cut and went to another setup. And because of that, they were able to bring themselves to an unconscious state of authenticity and purity that required a lot of counseling when the take was over. They would both retreat to their spaces on the set, and they would just sob. And they had their friends. They had their sort of their therapeutic companions that were there, usually in hair and makeup, who as you know, we know, everybody, hair and makeup knows more gossip than anybody else on a movie. They hear it all and they keep it all to themselves. But they also are tremendous when you get into an emotional state where you can't recover and you're crying. And so they went to their areas, and sometimes it was quite a while before they could come back to do another take. And they did it with relish. They didn't do it, oh no, we have to go through this again, because they kept searching for other levels. And they also knew it was the last time they were ever going to do that song. You got to the point in a movie where there's a wonderful scene and you love the writing and the actors adore the writing. And when the scene is over, it's like Petit Mort. They die a little bit because they're never going to do it again. It's not theater. They don't have another performance tomorrow and twice on Wednesday. It's over.
Right.
And so every time a great scene that is great on paper is transported into some twilight zone by the actors, they all feel that kind of postpartum depression, that they're never going to have a chance to ever do that again. And that's one of the things that's unique to our business of making television and movies. It's so unique to what we do.
Well spoken. Well spoken. Jane, there's a moment when Phil is alone. His brother has now gotten married. There's a big close-up on him, and then there's a close-up on the key that gets locked in the door, and you come back to him. And there's so much happening in that, and there's no dialogue in this particular moment. And I'm wondering if you remembered how that particular performance evolved at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember if I already decided to have it, but anyway, the pandemic sort of cut our shoot in half. And one of the advantages of it, of course, there was a lot of horror and people suffering, but it really created for me what was the ideal shoot. Like shoot half, have a couple of months off, and then you shoot the second half, and you can kind of recover and look at what you did and see how you want to improve it. And we'd done the exteriors, and what I was looking at and noticing was just how interesting it was when Ari was working close with Benedict, that something seemed to come out. Maybe when you were talking about Stephen, that sense that, these magical creatures, actors, they can be in the moment somehow, and so I planned to do more work like that with him when we got on set. And there's this time when Rose has just arrived, and Phil is, of course, not happy, not welcoming, not pleasant to her. He does really believe that his brother's wife couldn't be there for any other reason than to take advantage of his money, because in his mind, his brother doesn't have anything to offer a woman, which, he just is not able to see his brother. And now, for the first time, Phil's in his bedroom by himself, and they share a bathroom, and parents' room is just on the other side of that bathroom. And I always thought, and I often get actually a little bit disturbed by being too close to other people's rooms sometimes, when you can hear breathing or stuff, or, toiletry activities. I even extend that sometimes, like, to the neighbours next door, like, oh my God, they're lying in their bed right now, like just on the other side of my wall, It's a disturbing habit I have. But anyway, I lent that sort of to Phil in this situation, and was just imagining, Rose coming into that bathroom and thinking, oh my God, that brother's just there. So she, locks the door, and Phil, I guess just going in very tight there is just like, that act of focusing on something completely and utterly. And he's, able to imagine her in the other room, and that this is the new order of things, and he's alone. He's alone. This big tyrannical man is very vulnerable, and in his own house, not able to, feels displaced.
Did you speak to them the language you just used now, which is a description of what that moment is?
To Benedict?
Yes. Did you need to say anything, or was there, for example, was there
Ben
a
and
take
I just
two?
gabble to each other. It's like, a couple of monologists, I just wait till his monologue's over, and then I have a go. Swap back and forth, and I don't know how much he's heard, but we're like a brother, sister, or friends, or whatever, and nothing is off limits. We just can say anything we want to, and after a while, I might say, "Okay, let's just do it now," because you could go on. And let's just try everything we've talked about. Let's do it. Let's go. Okay, shoot. And I find that very effective. Like, just get that camera rolling, and then it's just like his platform. It's his stage, and Ben has got this emotional capacity, which is kind of extraordinary, to feel in a way that maybe not that many men do. Well, can't be said about you, Ken.
when Kirsten
which is beautiful.
When Kirsten is playing drunk, which is a really a difficult thing to do, because you don't want to indicate you're drunk, and yet there's right. Some amazing performances, particularly one when she falls down after going with the gloves. What conversation did you have about how she's going to portray alcoholism?
Yeah, we did talk about it. We talked about a few strategies. She had quite a few strategies herself. Like, one was just spinning before a take, just spinning on the spot, and then that does make you actually genuinely dizzy. And then we would have our secret formula, which is like quick drink, maybe.
I know. I put you next to Denis.
But you got the timing on that has to be pretty good.
Yeah.
and we didn't use it very we didn't use it very often. It was just in that scene where she was pretty drunk with her son, and I was really interested to see what would happen, you know.
Got it.
And how it would go, and what did happen was it really worked, and then it went off, you know.
Yeah.
And then we had to sort of get it back, and we do some more. Yeah.
Thank you, Jane.
I mean, you know, it's fun, you know.
Yes, it can be. Questionable performance. Timothy's hand in the box. What did you have him go through, Denis?
It was at the beginning of the shoot, and we were coming out of all those talk about the characters, and it's like it's always frightening. I mean, there's like when actor have to deal with surreal events or that where it's some actors have a lot of imagination, others are it's and it's like it was quite frightening and quite rewarding day because shooting that scene, working with Timothy, I realized at that precise moment that I had made the right choice as an actor. I don't know about you, but there's always at the beginning there's a moment of vérité, a truth moment where camera rolls. It's the first days, and you will see if you fucked it up or if you made the right choice. And of course, he proved himself in many movies, but there was the idea of stillness. I was fascinated with the idea that it will need to be as still as possible, and to endure a tremendous amount of pain, it will have to control. It was a scene both in the mother and the son. It's scenes where they are, both of them, because of their education, will be in needs to, they have the ability to control either the fear or the pain, and it was to find that balance that is easily more expressed in a book, but in a movie I need to find that balance where we express enough, but in some you feel that it restricts. So we talked a lot about putting a hand in a toaster and what it will feel like, and that's where the images that came from that, yeah.
Did you tell him specific things that were actually happening to him at this moment?
Yeah. I was. It's a thing that I love, is to be close and to talk. With some actors, some of them hate that, so I don't do it. But with Timothy, it's very early on. I started to talk to him, whisper to him as the scene goes, and I will say that we were all deeply afraid of Charlotte Rampling, and she was a very powerful figure in the room, and that helped the scene tremendously. I mean, yeah.
Did you say what literally, I mean, as you were talking to him at this moment, did you say what literally was happening? Did you say your hand is burning, or any words that were said? I understand you said control.
Yeah, we were talking about the sensation of the pain coming from burnt. Yeah, from being burned. Yes.
And do you remember doing a number of takes on this, or do you remember this?
Unfortunately, I remember that they had a tremendous amount of takes. Timothy was exhausted, but I was impressed by his commitment, and I tried. I was not working with several cameras. I was working with one camera, and I needed several angles, and I didn't want to compromise on the lenses, so I was like. And he was very generous, but there's a moment when the character endured so much pain that there's something that is awakening inside him, a force, and I was asking Timothy to rise and have defiance in his eyes, looking at Charlotte, and I was amazed at that. There's a moment where his face transformed. When I saw that it was a kind of exorcist, when there was something awakening, and he truly did that on camera, and I knew at that moment that I did the right casting.
And you use that word, awakening.
Yeah. It's like he's a tremendous actor.
Yeah. I've seen. All right, Paul, I want to deal with laughter. Mainly because there's a scene where all of them in the car and they're all laughing hysterically, and I'm curious because we don't have any setup, and we've had a scene before that, but there's something missing here. Do you remember how you got them all to be
Yeah, there was something there was a joke I think that was written that one of the characters is saying, and I think my memory is that I kept it fresh by adding stuff to it, would sort of whisper something to one of them to say, that kind of thing. But if you have 6 teenagers in a car, you don't really have to do that much. You just have to be rolling.
Were there moments for you where it was really challenging for getting a performance, moments you had to redirect that really stand out for you?
Well, there was a scene, yeah, and the mistake is to think that that I had to redirect the performance, or the scene was bad and it didn't need to be in the movie and it wasn't well written, and it was like you kind of bang your head against the wall because you think it's an important thing, and you think perhaps the actor isn't engaged emotionally. Not that you're placing blame, but you're just trying to discover why this isn't connecting to you or to this person who is faking it, and you feel it, and it's embarrassing. They're out there trying, and the truth is, it's not going to end up in the movie. It was like a scene late in the game, and it just wasn't very good. And we kind of knew that, but you can't really admit that at the time. Someone's like pouring their heart out. They're sort of trying to give it to you, and everybody kind of knows, and it's late at night, and it's hard. It's a hard one for the crew. Everybody kind of feels a little edgy, but that's okay because we'd been going great, guns, and everything was good. And to get to a clunker every once in a while is okay. Just don't let it go on too long.
If I may, did you have the temptation to reapproach the scene a different way after?
Oh, for sure. We talked about it for weeks. We're going to go back and get that scene. We're going to knock it out of the park. We're going to we were like fighters who'd been knocked out, who were like, just give me a rematch and I'll get it this time. And that dialogue went on for, I think Adam knew it was horseshit. He was like, we're never going back to that. Just let him keep talking about getting back in the ring, and and eventually I ran out of fight. I realized that's not going to be in the movie, is it? I think what had happened was we had done a scene before it where she's walking away from this great conversation she has with Joseph Cross, and we're meant to go to this other scene before she goes to find Gary, and we had this thing slotted in, and once we shot the scene of her walking away and you see this emotion that's happening, it kind of like reveals itself like a hammer in your head, like, dummy, you see what she's done here. Why are you going to go somewhere else? And, that helps. And then the dialogue stops about reshooting and all that good stuff.
Great. My last question for all of you. When you, it's actually sort of a quote from your movie, Denis, about fear being the sort of enemy of the mind here, or obliterating it. What do you all do when fear suddenly comes on, which may not be because you're all so experienced and so good, but there still may be a moment of fear. How do you handle it?
You fake it. You pretend that you're not scared. I don't know. That's kind of a joke to make the point, but at the same time, like that's also where the joy is. Yeah, if you're a junkie for that kind of like fear, or getting out to a place where you're uncomfortable, that's the thrill. To me, it is. It's exciting when things get nervous. It's probably a sign that something's going right, I would think. I mean, I suppose a philosophy in life is that you're supposed to that freedom is no fear, But on a film set, a little bit of that helps fuel you,
Got it. Thank you. Denis?
Me, I'm right now. I'm in prep for the part 2, and I'm terrorized. I have anxiety, bad sleep. I'm in a fear mode. It's like I'm wondering why I want to be a film director. and there's moment, then the fear I know will happen again, and I think it's I wonder if it's coming from you or from someone else saying someone that I love that the amount of will it takes to open the door of the car in the morning to get on set.
Yeah.
There's a moment when the biggest decision of the day is to get out of the car. That there's a lot of fear there. Once I'm on set, I tried through the years to develop the ability to, if I'm experiencing something hard or if I don't know the answer, to try to be comfortable with that zone, to be comfortable with not knowing the answer and calm down to, that tremendously changed my way of dealing with fear and anxiety on set, to be comfortable with not knowing. So someone comes to me saying, what do we do? How do we fix it? And if I don't, I said, I have no idea. And then just admitting this and give me silence. I need a minute. I need to think, and just really letting the pressure off and walking alone and thinking all the time the solution comes to mind. But I have to admit that I don't know, and I'm shitting in my pants, and then I feel good.
Jane, and to some degree you've discussed this because of the work you were doing, but what do you do when fear comes up?
Well, say if it comes up, I'll just talk about something different than I talked about before. So, if it comes up, as it often does in rehearsal, because everyone is at a stage where it's not really happening, and you're trying to hold the space. It's what I think the director's job is like. Is the person with faith and with trust, and knowing that for us to get from wherever we are to wherever we're going, it has to be awkward. This awkwardness is, fine. You have to have faith that these people, everybody is tuned, knowing that, in 3 weeks' time we're going on. We've got to get our accents together. We've got to go walks, this, that, everything. But right now it ain't there, and you just really want to try and create the space for them to find something authentic and genuine. And then just the smallest thing, I remember when I was doing the Bright Star Keats thing, everybody, when they're doing period films, they want to act like I don't know, a cliche of what their oldie worldy behaviour is, that hold a teacup. And it just suddenly, everyone piles into these cliches, and they were doing scenes or doing things in the room, and everybody was acting so hard. It was hard to look at. It was really uncomfortable. And then they sort of turned on me as well, like, well, why didn't you do something, fix us, and I was just saying, well, really, I was just waiting for something that I could believe in. And I think at one point, finally, Ben Whishaw went off and was like writing something on a piece of paper. And my eye just went straight to him, and he wasn't really doing much, just nothing. But, this is happening, that was the feeling. And from there I went, Ben, I'm really paying attention to you now. I think it's just like, he can relax, he doesn't have to do anything special. He can just be, sort of thing. And slowly that, I think the worst of it was when they kind of turned on me, like, you're the director, you should help us out of this. I was like, oh yeah, I wish I could.
Well, somehow you can.
But it is, discomfort is part of the game, I think. That awkwardness and discomfort is part of the game. And actually, Keats says a great thing about negative capability, which is the capacity to be in a mystery without reaching after fact or reason, and like just accepting that the mystery is a real creative strength. And you don't know where you're going to get out of it or how you're going to get out of it. But it, like you were saying, Denny, just to say I don't know, is kind of powerful. It's true.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jane. Stephen, fear?
Well, Yeah, I mean, I know fear. I was born with fear, and I had 7 kids through fear, and now 6 grandchildren through fear. Fear is a good thing. Confidence is the killer, and I say that because confidence throws an anchor and limits the possibilities of seeing a scene that you know ad nauseum. It limits the possibility for anything beyond what you feel confident in. And so if I become insecure with a scene, it's the only way I can basically decide how to change the scene, how to explore what I already thought I had explored. I thought I mined that out. There's nothing left. But if I suddenly wake up and I come onto a set and a scene I'm so confident in, I suddenly feel like I'm on stage naked, as that naked on stage dream, or not knowing your lines a dream. And that's when panic, I think, creates a whole different level of exploration. And it happens in milliseconds. It doesn't mean I walk off and I pace and I think, but when I feel really uncomfortable, I get more ideas through discomfort than I do when I come onto a set and I say, okay, I'm going to shoot the scene exactly as written. I like the way I think the scene's going to sound, and let's just go ahead and go to work. So I actually look for things that scare me. I look for those things, and sometimes something doesn't scare me, and we just shoot what's on the page. But when something really makes me feel like, wow, I'm missing the point of the scene. I suddenly don't understand what the scene is and where its place is in the structure of the movie. Where does it go? Am I going to cut it out in 4 months in the cutting room? Am I going to do 3 days work, and those 3 days I know right now are not going to be in the movie? Why am I wasting everybody's time? That's when I think the inspiration happens.
Wow.
That's when it happens.
Well, thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
Kenneth? A friend of mine often says to me, the greatest possibility for advancement occurs at the greatest moment of negativity. At my scaredest on a film, I was in the... We spoke about this before, the vortex of how am I going to get a night's sleep? Just give me sleep, please. Just give me any form of sleep. Just let me escape into sleep, or give me something that will give me the energy tomorrow to not be so fucking paranoid. So said, here's what we're going to do tonight. I'm so scared of what I'm going to do tomorrow. I'm sleeping here. So put the trailer next to the soundstage, which they just, well, you can't sleep here. There's security, insurance. I said, I'm not going home. I'm so terrified that I need to be able to potentially get up in the night and walk onto the stage for this massive indoor action sequence bit where I know for sure, but I'm not saying it out loud to you, that I don't know what I'm doing. But I know that there are hundreds of people, there are dump tanks, there are hydraulics. It has to be linked to a whole view of CGI. I'm so scared of it that I'm either going to sleep here, or I'm going to get in a car and I'm going to drive, and I'm never going to come back anyway. So please put the trailer next to the entrance to the stage, okay? And my wife said, you're just, leave me alone. I've just got to, I won't sleep anyway, but whatever. 3 o'clock in the morning. Hello, sir. I said, what, yeah, what's going on? The star, who was due to be the central part of the massive action sequence. He said, we just had a message, and person X won't be in tomorrow. They've had a problem getting back from Europe. So now, now it's the nightmare is, I was thinking, am I actually awake? It is 3 o'clock in the morning. This is the security guy. It's just one bloke. There's only one bloke in the studio and me. And he's just come to tell me, the guy who's central to everything you're doing tomorrow, he won't be in. So now I'm in slow motion, said, open the stage door. Open the fucking stage door. So now it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I've officially gone into mad professor. Because now I've got to work out how the fuck can we do this without the star? And it was the greatest thing that could possibly have happened. Because we then cut the thing up, because I didn't have to worry about waiting for this thing. It was dangerous. There was stunts. There was going to be whatever. We had 3 picture doubles. We put them in. It became the easiest thing in the world. And from sort of 3 till 6, by the end of that day, I was mental. I needed to be sectioned at the end of that day. But when they arrived for the first time on that shoot, I didn't say I don't. I said, I know exactly what we're doing. I know what we're doing. Just give me the doubles, get me the hydraulics, and do it. I'm sleeping at the studio every night.
Well, I'm not recommending you all. I have one more question. I can't resist. Superstitions. And you can even. Any of you have any superstitions in terms of I have to wear the same pair of shoes when I'm on set? Any of you? Superstitions?
Don't walk under ladders. That's what I don't do.
Got it. Anybody else?
I sometimes have a piece of clothing that I wore, like on a day when things went well, that I want to wear it again and again. Like, oh, this is going to be a tricky scene. Where's that jumper?
It's not a superstition, but I wear hokas when I direct. Hokas make me a better director.
Yeah.
But don't tell that to Hoka, because I don't want to be on television selling the product. But no superstitions.
Got it. Denis, Paul, anything you do?
I think I might wear those too.
There's hokas.
I think it's slightly wardrobe based. Now that you guys are mentioning it, I get a little, some wardrobe superstitions. A shirt that worked well, I want to wear it again the next day. By the end of a shoot, my whole trunk is filled with all different types of clothes. Because sometimes you wake up and it's cold, and you think could it get hot on the set? I'll bring something else just in case. And my whole bedroom is in the trunk of my car. It's really crazy.
Well, the fact is that you all bring some incredible baggage to the work that you do, and then when you open up those bags, you show us brilliance. And we thank you for your time and for your genius in the film world. And here you are.
I remember I have a superstition.